So this time we'll be looking at doing some upgrades on our Sega Dreamcast. Now I like to keep my consoles and computers as stock as possible. However, certain things definitely need upgrading. So starting with this is called a Dream PSU and it's a replacement power supply for your Sega Dreamcast. You can see this I got from AliExpress, but the instructions are really good, clear English. The board itself, if you've ever seen a Sega Dreamcast power supply, it's a lot bigger because the AC to DC conversion happens on the board inside the Dreamcast. Now, if you're using a GDEmu emulator, which I'm using in this particular consoles, that generates normally even more heat because you're no longer using that 12 volts for the original GD drive. So for this Dream PSU, it's using an external 12 volt supply, which is doing your AC to DC conversion, reducing the heat in the console itself. Now if we have a look at this little power supply unit that comes with it, it's very well built. It's a 100 volts to 240 volts AC, outputting 12 volts DC at 3 amps, so more than enough to supply your Dreamcast. Also, the other thing I like, it comes with a Euro connector, a US connector, an Australian connector. And for me, I need the UK one, living in the UK. And depending on what one you need, you just simply click it in and that's all good to go. So we'll just move these out of the way for a minute and we'll bring our Dreamcast in here. Now I've removed the screws already. There's just 4 crosshead screws. That one in the top left hand corner is usually covered by your modem, which again just clips out. And again, I've removed the screws on my original power supply here, but there's a couple of screws normally holding that down. The other thing I've bought here as well for my upgrade is a battery compartment. So now rather than having the soldered in battery, when the battery dies, I can just simply take it out, put a new one in again. Makes it a lot easier. Also, it's got a rehealable fuse and a different coloured LED, which is not really needed, and a capacitor, also not needed. Again, you can see very simple instructions with this kit, but enough to do what you need it to do. So if I just wiggle this power supply loose, again, depending on how long it's been in there for, you might need to put a screwdriver underneath there just to pull it up to get it started a little bit, but then just slowly kind of wiggle it to get it out of the way. Also disconnect that grey cable at the back there, which obviously connects the power to the board. Now with that out of the way, our next thing we need to tackle is getting our controller port board out. So this just has a little ribbon cable in it, which again just slots in. It's just using friction. There are no little pins or plugs or anything that you need to pull out of the way. And then we've just got 4 screws, actually holds the board in place. So these modifications we're carrying out on this Sega Dreamcast. So first thing, the battery. The reason for we're replacing this internal battery is when it dies, it means every time you start your console, you've got to put in the time and date if you want to, or you can just ignore it, but it's a bit of a pain. The self-healing fuse as well is a good modification to do, because if you do plug in a faulty controller, it means this will blow and it means any controller you plug in won't work. So on the right hand side, we've got this little fan cable we need to get out. And again, this can be a little bit tricky. Best way I've found to do it is to just use a terminal screwdriver, like so. Just kind of push it underneath and then pull it away a little bit, just till it gets past them little clip points that's on there. And then we've got our board. This is ready for desoldering and soldering our new components in now. Now you can see what they've done on the battery thing. They've flipped them terminals over, which I hate when they do stuff like that, because it means once we've desoldered it, it means we've got to then flip them little pins up again to get it out, which can be a little bit annoying sometimes. So what I'm going to do first is desolder all the components, desolder the battery, desolder the fuse, might as well replace that capacitor, and then replace the LED with the new one. So here I'm just trying to get out the original fuse. And you can see why this is so much fun trying to flip these things up. When you slip, you burn your finger. So be very careful when you do this. Again, probably not the smartest way of doing it. But the trouble is, with a little bit of solder on there, sometimes you need a soldering iron to get it off. So that's the original fuse, and it looks a lot like a resistor. I remember once I had a Dreamcast and the controllers didn't work, and I was amazed to find out that was actually a fuse and not a resistor, because it looks like a resistor. So finally, again, this is an optional thing. You don't have to fit this with the kit. The original LED on this one's like an orange LED. I'm just going to remove it because the kit comes with a blue LED, and I thought just to make it look a little bit different. However, you don't need to remove this if you don't want to. If you want to keep it the original colour, there's no problem in that at all. This kit comes in two versions as well. So the one I've got takes an ML2032. So that's a rechargeable version of the battery, and there's also one that just takes a normal CR2032, which is a non-rechargeable one. And I think the only difference between that kit and this kit is there's a diode in there, obviously to prevent the Dreamcast from charging a CR232, which is not rechargeable. So I've got all my components desoldered now. Next thing is to fit them in place. So I'm just making sure that long leg goes in the positive side, short leg's the negative side. Make sure I get that the right way around. And again, we can just hold this in place with a little bit of solder. So what I do is just solder up one pin, then I can straighten up the other pin, solder that, and then just cut these parts off. Okay, next we've got this rehealable fuse. So the idea with this is if you plug in a bad connector or controller, with this fuse, if it blows, it blows. Then you just got to replace it. With this one, the idea is you just power it down, power it back up again, and the fuse is good to go again. Which again is something, as I say, I've come across a fair bit on Sega Dreamcast. And like I say, first time I saw it, I just assumed that was a resistor, that wasn't a fuse at all, because it doesn't look like a fuse. But with this in place now, this should help if it does happen again. If a bad controller gets put in there, it won't be a case of having to replace that component. Next thing I want to put in here is my LED. And if we look at our little chart to the right there, it says long legs are positive, short legs are negative. On the little part there, it says on it A and K. So A is your positive, K is your negative. We just plug that in. Now if you get this the wrong way around, what will happen is the LED won't light up, because obviously the diode won't allow the electricity to flow in the wrong direction. So again, with that one, what I've done, I've soldered one leg. The component was a little bit out, so I just heated that one leg up and pushed it through a little bit more, just so it's sitting flush, and then I can solder the other leg up and then go on that original leg again and just make sure the solder's good on that. Just going to check to make sure I got them legs right again, and that does look okay. With the fuse, it doesn't matter which direction round you put that in, that's not polarity sensitive. Finally, we've got our battery compartment. Now this can only go one way, it's got 3 legs on it, so there's only one possible way to fit it. I had a little bit of trouble here because one of the legs was slightly bent over, but again, it went in okay. And it's holding in there quite firmly, which is nice, so no need to bend the legs over or anything. I can just put it in there and solder it in place. So that's all 3 legs done. Now I'm going to get my ML2032. Now with lithium batteries, you don't want to touch the positive and negative together with your fingers. You will discharge it and possibly damage the battery. That's why I'm using the packaging here to push it into place. And it's very easy to touch both sides of these things, but it does shorten the life of them considerably. Good thing is with that holder, it shows which side's positive, which side's negative as well. So easy to install the battery the right way around. Now we'll just put this back into our console again. And this is a little bit fiddly. Not gonna lie, it was a little bit of a struggle. If you take it out, you can look, because originally I thought maybe I can take this plate out, but without taking all the bottom out, it was a very difficult thing to do. It kind of jiggles a little bit. You can just kind of jiggle it over a bit and get your board back in there again. So once it's back in there, and we're happy with it, just connect our ribbon cable again. And again, this is just pressure on there. It's not a clip or anything. It just pulls out tightly, pushes in tightly. It's a very snug fit, but it works. Just going to put our screws back in as well. And then obviously we plugged our fan back in. Next thing we want to do is now fit our Dream PSU power supply. Again, got a good amount of cable on there, so it'll easily reach the back of the Dreamcast. You can buy just the board itself if you want it. You don't have to get the power supply or the connectors or anything like that. However, to me, it made sense to just get the whole lot all in one go. So this next part was a little bit... Well, originally I wanted to keep this in here, but really it does nothing anymore. This little piece of plastic that used to insulate the original power supply from the main chassis of the Dreamcast, because again, 230 volts or 110 volts, if it touches that chassis, it's just gonna blow out. The same way if it's the 12 volts or the 5 volts touches that, that's still gonna blow it out. But on this one, there's no real need. It's not touching anything. It connects to one of the posts as well. Now the nice thing here with this replacement for the figure of 8, so with this one it looks like it's injection molded rather than a 3D print, which is nice. So the way I put this in is so that the hollowed out part is facing into the console and the flat edge is on the outside. Just putting that little nut on the end there, and I'm just going to use a pair of long nose pliers just to give it a little nip. I mean, it's only plastic, you don't need to go too heavy with it. Just make sure that's nice and tight. That fits in there. Now that plastic out of the way, that grey cable's sitting okay as well. So first thing I want to do before I put the top of the case on is just power it up and make sure we've got everything running. There's our blue LED, that's looking good. So far so good. So just put the top of our case back on again. And you can see at the back there, it looks like it's part of the console. It doesn't look out of place, which I kind of like as well. And again, I mean, another thing I could do with that GDEmu is just bring a slot up so it slots into the top. But for now, I'm happy with it the way it is. So because this is a new battery in here, the first thing we need to do is obviously set our date and time. Now, normally with your original batteries in there, you'll be doing this every single time if you need to, every time you plug in your games console. However, now this is set and it's got a good battery in there, this should last a while, and every time I plug in this Dreamcast, it'll obviously charge that battery a little bit more, and hopefully it should keep its date and time for a long time to come. And when that battery starts wearing out, it's going to be an easy job. There's no soldering required. It's just going to be a case of taking that battery out, putting a new battery in. So with that set, let's see if we still got a working games console. That's looking good. So another thing I wanted to try out, on a previous video, I checked to see what the temperature was like on the original Sega Dreamcast with a GD drive and without a GD drive, and I just wanted to see what this board was like. So this is after about an hour of it being on. And again, I'm surprised at how hot this is actually getting. I mean, it's not bad. It's still lower than the original power supply using a GD drive. But I mean, we're getting about 57, and it seems to be two little components on them that seem to be getting the hottest. So again, it might be a case of if you wanted to, you could fit a little heatsink to the top of them too. However, I mean, this is after an hour and it's got to 57, and this was with the case on as well, not the case off, so it's been enclosed in there. I don't know whether that fan's actually doing anything on the side anymore. Again, it can be a little bit annoying just whirring away there. I might try it without that fan connected just to see if there's any difference between that, but for now I'll leave the fan connected anyway. Just wanted to finally see what it looks like compared to the original. So that's the original with the orange light, and this one's got the blue light. I gotta say, I think I like the blue light more. It goes more with the Dreamcast logo, because I know in the US it's an orange logo rather than that blue logo, but obviously here we had the blue logo, so it makes more sense to have the blue LED. Anyway, with that, I'll see you on the next one.